Hey Miraculous fans, Crystal here, and today I'm actually going to be talking about the Miraculous movie. Okay, but first I want to mention, for the longest time I believed I wouldn't end up doing a review of the movie. Why? Because I figured in order to do that, I'd have to re-watch it before reviewing it so I could make sure I remembered everything. And the thing is, I really didn't want to do that. But the thing is, I think that on its own kind of speaks for itself about how I feel about the movie. Considering how much I'm obsessed with Miraculous, you'd think I'd enjoy anything related to it. So the fact that I just don't want to sit through the movie to rewatch it for a review kind of says something about the movie already. It tells you, even as a big Miraculous fan, I don't feel like watching it. But that doesn't mean I can't review it. For one thing, it'll be a shorter review because it'll just be the main stuff that I remember. And I'm happy with that because it won't be an in-depth analysis with a memory of each scene, but instead it'll just be the highlights, the takeaways of what people remember about this movie, even if they haven't just watched it. Which I think is just as important to hear about. It's good to hear how people remember something rather than just watching a review that's like an in-depth analysis kind of thing. So I guess I'll be going over my most memorable thoughts about it that stuck with me enough that I still remember them. And I think that's still a good way to do a review, because it means you're getting a review from the perspective of, some time has passed and you're seeing the thoughts that stuck with me all the time. But the thing that actually made me decide to make this review is actually all thanks to a Reddit post on the Miraculous subreddit. Someone posted about the movie asking for thoughts and shared some of their own thoughts. And I decided to comment, giving my own thoughts and also responding to some of theirs. And I got really into it, rambling about all of that stuff. And to the point where sometime later I was looking at my list of ideas for videos that I was considering doing, and I was revisiting the idea of if I'd review the movie, and that's when I remembered that Reddit post. I went back to it and looked at my comment, and I realized I wrote so much that I basically scripted a short review right there. So then I was able to use that comment to basically organize my thoughts, which I'm going to go over in this video. So here we are. Not an in-depth analysis, but a review looking back on the movie. To start off, to me, the most memorable thing about the movie is that it's not canon. And that's why it's so easy to pretend it doesn't exist. Not because it's so bad I want to erase it, but it's because it can just not exist. Because it is not connected to the main show. It's kind of associated with it, and it takes a lot of the core elements, but it's not the same canon. The thing about the movie is that because it's not part of the same world of the show, that's what not being canon means, in case you didn't know. And this was really jarring at the time when I watched it. It was weird that it was so different and that some parts straight up contradicted it. Now, when the movie was first announced and finally confirmed, I initially expected something like, for instance, the Steven Universe movie, which does take place within its show's canon. It takes place between Change Your Mind, which is the end of Season 5, and Future, also called Season 6, if you want to call it that, kind of. Now, in comparison, Steven Universe did the movie idea very well, because one, it stayed within the canon of the show, but two, at the same time, it was made accessible for new viewers, what with the storybook recap at the start, as well as each main character's solo in Happily Ever After, which recapped their past. But three, it was also done in a way that a show viewer can skip it, and if they only watch the show, they won't be super confused like they missed something, because not too much is added to the story in the Steven Universe movie, except maybe the existence of Spinel, because she shows up in an episode of Future, But besides that, it did really well on those points. And that's what I initially expected when I heard we were getting a Miraculous movie. But instead we got something that wasn't canon and made a whole new story. Which meant some parts felt all kinds of wrong when they contradict the lore we're familiar with. Comparing it to the 3 points I made about the Steven Universe movie, number one, no, it did not stay within the canon of the show, and that on its own is not outright bad. It's just, you gotta do it well and make it its own thing if you're going to make it its own adaptation. There are plenty of franchises that do movies and shows that are not the same canon. Take, for instance, how you have things like the DC TV shows and the DC movies. Like the newest Superman movie is not within the same canon as any Superman TV show or comic or previous movie. It's kind of its own thing. And that's fine. It takes inspiration from other Superman lore, but it's allowed to contradict it because it is its own canon. But you need to do it well, and I'm not sure the Miraculous movie did that. The other 2 points I made about Steven Universe movie. Number 2 was that it was made accessible for new viewers. And I think they were trying to do that in the Miraculous movie. Because they had the whole origin story thing, there was nothing where it'd be super confusing if you haven't watched the show. Which in itself means, yes, it is done in a way that a show viewer can skip it and only watch the show, because it is not within the same canon. Steven Universe movie kept itself in the same canon as the show. Miraculous did not. But moving on, a lot of my thoughts as a whole when I was watching the movie, I do remember, the whole of the movie felt kind of like it was made by someone who barely watched the show. Which I know that's not actually the case, because I heard that Thomas Astruc said something about that it is basically what he imagined Miraculous to be without Zag's influence or something like that. But what I'm saying is it felt like it was made by someone who barely watched the show because of some contradictions or out-of-character moments. Which leads me into the romance plot. Like, the careless whisper moments were honestly cringy. Now, I watched the movie with my partner at the time, who wasn't as into Miraculous as I am, but had still seen most of the show and was aware of how it should be. And when the first careless whisper bit played, even they thought it was weird. And then, because I'd seen like promotional like trailer stuff or just stuff people had posted, I said to them, "Oh, I've heard about this. Apparently the song plays every time they have a moment." And my partner went, "Every time?" Yeah. Okay, some of Adrien Cat Noir's moments were pretty, honestly. Especially that part near the end where he was all mopey and ignored her. That is not my Adrien, okay? It felt like somebody watched a few episodes of season 1 and saw that he was flirty as Cat Noir, and that morphed into them going, "Got it, I'll just make him a horny teenage boy." So he gets depressed when he gets rejected. Like, come on, this isn't the Adrien we know. There's so much more to him. But they saw flirty Cat Noir in the early days, and that translated into horny teenage boy. Like, that it just did not feel right. All the romance stuff, like, okay, some of it was kind of nice, but for the most part, you know? Speaking of the romance thing, they also tried to do enemies to lovers, with them basically hating each other at first. And it didn't work well, because you can't do enemies to lovers with so little time to develop it. It just feels like it came out of nowhere, and they used a song montage to suddenly make them love each other. And it didn't feel like it had the right build-up. Now, speaking of pacing, I'm getting great with these segues. The other problem is they wanted to do both an origin story and also have them defeat the big villain at the end, which doesn't work because it means skipping a huge chunk of time or saying that they beat him after a rather short time, or a bit of both. Compare this to something like the Superman movie. I complimented that on the fact that they skipped the origin story and just had him be established as Superman so that it would not feel rushed by doing his origin story and taking up like a third of the movie with that and sacrificing a lot of build-up. But this movie, we had to do both an origin story and defeating a big villain, which should have had more time, and you can't do that well in a movie. The plot of Miraculous works so well because it is a TV show that you can drag out with filler and a flashback origin thing and more filler, but also some plot developments over time until eventually you can defeat a big villain and it feels like a worthwhile payoff. It just seemed like the writers really wanted to give us the things that the show hadn't had a chance to give us yet. One of those being Hawkmoth's defeat, the other thing being the reveal, both of which were not done that well due to pacing and time restrictions due to it being a movie. And of course, the other thing they wanted to give us, although it's not something that we'd never gotten, was an origin story. We have origins. It's just that they wanted to do a different take on the origin story. But yeah, the pacing was super messy because we had to get an origin story, an enemies to lovers thing, which didn't work without the proper build-up, and then in the end, we defeat the villain and we got the reveal. If I could have rewritten it, I would have not done the reveal and maybe save that for a sequel, because I feel like they're planning a sequel. They probably tried to leave it open to that, but yeah. Now, one interesting point that someone mentioned when they reviewed the movie or gave some thoughts on the movie in that Reddit post is they mentioned the interesting detail about that we don't get to see Adrien being recruited the same way that we got Marinette being recruited. She gets the Miraculous, and we have that song, You Are Ladybug, which is my favorite song from the movie, which isn't that bad. But anyway, what we didn't get was Adrien's recruitment scene, which I wholeheartedly agree with the person who said that. Missed opportunity there. But I feel like in this movie, they made him more of a side character at times, which the show's also rather guilty of that, but I'll put that aside. They made him more of a side character and wanted to keep the movie more so from Marinette's perspective to make her the protagonist, and to her, he just shows up there as Cat Noir. I get what they were going for, but I feel like it could have been better if we had proper dual protagonists, or at least let us flesh out his character a bit more by seeing his recruitment. If you don't want to do dual protagonists and you want to keep Marinette as the protagonist, I understand that. But you can still flesh out a side character by giving them a scene on their own, you know? The protagonist doesn't have to be on screen the whole time. You can have a scene without the protagonist in order to flesh out and develop a side character, which you could have done if you showed his recruitment. But then again, maybe they also didn't do that to save time because the pacing was already so messed up that they had to rush things. Now, another thing that made it feel like someone making it didn't watch the show, when Hawkmoth akumatized all those people. I remember when I was watching it, I saw him do that, and I was like, since when can he do multiple akumas? He can't. And why'd you change that? Like, in the season 2 finale, he needed a catalyst for that, which is where he akumatized Natalie and said, your power is to amplify powers, and then she amplified his, so he could do multiple akumas. Although, why he never tried that idea again, and never gives someone the power to amplify powers in later episodes, I'll never understand. But I guess they wanted to save such a big threat for finales, but they should have found a way to explain why he didn't try that again in later episodes. But I'm getting off topic because that's not about the movie. Anyway, he cannot do multiple akumas in the show. In the movie, he just does it. So question 1, why change that? I guess because they wanted to make the threat bigger? I don't know. But also, if you do change that, then what are the rules and where do you draw the line? Because if he can do more than one, okay, he can do 2, 3, 4, how many? 10, 50, 100, a million? Just get everyone in Paris with negative emotions, like in the season 2 finale. But then the threat would have been too big, you know? So that's the other problem with this movie. What are the rules? We don't want to tell you. We do not want to fully flesh out and establish the lore of this world and these magical objects. When you have magic, you have to explain the rules to the magic. And the movie did not do that. I guess they kind of forgot to because they thought, oh, but they've probably seen the show. They know how the Miraculous work. Right, but because this movie is a separate canon, you need to make it accessible to viewers who did not watch the show. So yes, you need to explain these things, like how many akumas can he do? If he can do more than one, then how many is it? Is there a limit? Is it unlimited? In which case, why didn't he do more? Does it hurt him the more he does them? Then why didn't you show that? I don't know. So that's just really not done that well. You need to do better, especially when it involves your big villain. And they didn't. Now, moving on, probably my last thought here is the fact that this movie is a musical. Now, again, comparing this to the Steven Universe movie, Steven Universe was able to do it because their show was already known for having songs. Like, it's not a full-on musical show where there's a song like every episode, but the show is known for having songs, so it didn't feel out of place in the movie when songs were used to aid in telling the story. But in this movie, I wasn't that into it. It didn't need to be a musical, and it feels like such a cop-out in some points where they try to just use a song to show development. Like the whole falling in love thing. Overall, the musical aspect wasn't too bad to me, just a bit weird or jarring at times. Now, when people talk about the songs in the Miraculous movie, one point a lot of people make, including the post that inspired this video, is the voice actors, because a lot of people complained that Christina V is a singer and could have done Marinette's songs, and she didn't. Now, for anyone wondering, there is an explanation for why she didn't. I still would have preferred to hear her as Marinette, but I can tell you the actual explanation. So the whole idea of doing a Miraculous movie was tossed around quite a few times over the years before it got very far, There were times where it was just a rumor or they kind of announced it, but then they took it back and were like, no, we're not doing it yet. And at some point while planning the movie, someone promised Lou, the French voice of Marinette or Ladybug, that she could do the songs in the movie in both French and English. So when they actually did make the movie and it was finally being made, they kept that promise. So for us English-speaking viewers, it might feel jarring that the voice switches when Marinette sings, and it might feel odd because we know Christina V can sing anyway. But to them, Lou is the original Ladybug. I'm not saying I agree with the decision, because it's like, well, yeah, she's the original Ladybug, but she's the French voice, and we have Christina V. But, oh well, they promised her. She probably really wanted to do it in English as well, and she did, and she was happy with that. And she did just fine. I'm not saying Christina V would have done it so much better. She did fine. Her singing is fine. It's just that it's a different voice. So, Marinette's songs, it doesn't sound quite like it's her to us. Speaking of which, I have seen, at one point Christina V did do a cover of You Are Ladybug. She even got the voice of Tiki to join her in that. And it sounds really good. I like to listen to that. But anyway, Lou did just fine, and it sounds pretty good. It just means we have to put up with the voice switching for singing, which is fine. As for the songs themselves, as you might have noticed, the only one I've been mentioning is You Are Ladybug, and because that's the only one that really stuck out to me, I sort of remember all the others, It's just that they didn't stick out to me to the point where I would listen to them again. They were fine in the movie itself, but they weren't memorable, When a movie is a musical, the songs should be good and memorable and iconic to the point where somebody who likes that franchise is going to go on to listen to those songs again just for fun. Take something like the Steven Universe movie. I can still listen to any of those songs just for fun. But these songs, they don't have the right feel to them. I just don't really enjoy them, except for You Are Ladybug. And I usually listen to the Christina V cover. But yeah, it's a hit or miss thing, and the songs just didn't feel right to me. I get it if you liked them, but it just didn't work for me. But overall, the movie, on the surface, it's fine. It's just that, and I know it feels like I spent this whole video complaining, but what I've been doing is telling you what my most memorable thoughts were that, okay, I'm still having these thoughts and feeling these ways about the movie. So, if they're all negative, well, sorry. But yeah, these have been my thoughts on the Miraculous movie. In general, I guess the movie is fine. I guess maybe it's more for kids, which was their original target audience. It works fine if you just put it on for a kid to watch. But for those of us longtime fans of Miraculous, it didn't quite feel like enough to me, or it just didn't quite cut it. Maybe it was the whole thing of not being the same canon. Maybe, and some moments were just a bit out of character. Like I said, there were some moments where it felt like somebody who was making the movie hadn't even watched all of the show, which I'm sure they had, it just felt a bit off. And I get they were trying to do something different. It's just that it didn't work. For me, anyway. Not everything I say is fact, even if I phrase it as fact, like when I say, oh, well, they tried and it didn't work. I mean, for me. But I've rambled on enough. So with that being said, I don't really have many other Miraculous videos planned, except, of course, when new episodes get released, I will be reviewing them, and there will not be a delay this time. As soon as they get released, I will watch, record, and then upload as soon as possible. So, stay subscribed for that, and if I think of any other discussion ideas, I will do some more Miraculous content. So with that being said, I will see you next time for maybe more Miraculous and other things as well. See you next time, guys.